Okay, so let's discuss a little bit about some of the things that we've gone over so far as in reference to the string. Okay, so let's say I wrote out name equals Floyd. Okay, and we know that the value of that string is Floyd, the word Floyd, and it's going to be assigned to the string name. Okay, and I know that I can do several things from there. I can go in and say, okay, well, name, and I can put brackets, and I might say 2. So that 2, I want to talk about that just a little bit and what it represents. In your textbook, when you're looking at a subscript operator, okay, and you're working with subscripts, that means I want to pull out something that's in that string Floyd, okay? Not necessarily the entire string, but something that's in that string. Now, that index, or that's what the 2 represents, it's an index, or in your book, they say that index is just simply an integer expression. You're telling it what position you want to look for. And we already know that the interpreter, the computer, always starts counting at 0. So for example, the letter F would be position 0. The letter L would be position 1, position 2, position 3, position 4. Just to kind of elaborate on something you read in the textbook and in the lecture notes, there's kind of like a trick to trying to figure this out. So when you're looking at the position is always going to be 1 less than the actual length of the string. So the word Floyd, or the string Floyd, has position 0 through 4 because we start counting at 0. But the actual length of that string is actually 1 more than the last position. So the length of Floyd is going to be 5. So let's take a look at how this integer expression, or this index, actually works. So when I call on name, index, or position 2, let's see what it's going to give me. Okay, it's going to pull out the letter O. It's going to pull out the letter O. Again, if I were to come in now and say the length of name, we know that that's going to return 5. So there are 2 different things going on here. I can simply search the length of the string, which it goes in and looks at every position, and it returns an integer telling me how many characters were in that string. Or I can go in and look for something specific, like a subscript, and that's going to be where I'm directing or pointing to a specific location or position in that string based on a certain character. Okay, so when I say name 2, or the index 2, it's going to pull out the letter 0, or excuse me, the letter O. Let's try another one. So if I go in and say and again, it's a bracket here. I know we're so used to using the parentheses. Let's say if I say name 0, okay? Name 0, that's going to be the first position in the string, and that's going to give me the letter F, okay? So that's kind of how that works. The next thing that I want to look at is how do we use a for statement or a loop to actually go through and look at and evaluate a string. Let's go over to the next window and we're going to practice on a for statement using some of the things that we just discussed, knowing what length does, knowing how the integer expression or your index is used. Okay, so let's consider this. We have a variable that's been assigned the value Floyd. Okay, so let's go back, and this should be a review for you because we learned how to do the for statement in the previous chapter. Now remember, a for statement, we learned that we could say like for count in range 1 to 4. So we could tell it to start at 1 and stop at 4. Okay, or we could say 1 to 100 or 1 to 10. We could even say 1 through 100 and in increments of 10. So this is very similar. So let's take a look at what we have. So we're going to say for count, and count is just whenever I'm doing a loop, I like to use the word count because that kind of puts me in the mind of that I'm keeping up with something. Okay, in your textbook they use the word index. It's just a counter control variable, meaning every time that loop goes around, that value is being updated. I like to use count. Your textbook uses index. They both mean the same thing. They're just a counter control variable. Okay, so for count in range, okay, all of that should be review for you. Now, instead of me saying 1 to 4, or instead of me saying, 1 to 100 in increments of 10, you're actually going to tell it to count the length of the string. Okay, so this is what we have here. So it's the length of name. Okay, so that means it's going to start at position 0 and go all the way to position 4. So you're telling it to count the entire length of the string. That means it's going to, every time this loop comes around or is repeated, it's going to process the letter F, the letter L, the letter O, the letter Y, the letter D, and then the loop will stop. Every time that that loop passes or repeats, it's going to process this line of code. Let's discuss it, okay? We're telling it to print the value of count and the value of the position of name, okay? So let's talk about each one of these arguments in this print statement. The first one is the value of count. Now we know that every pass, that every time that loop repeats, the value of count is being updated. So the first time that the loop repeats, okay, the first time that that loop repeats, it's going to be 0. Because remember, if you look back at what we discussed as far as the F has position 0, the L has position 1, the O, the Y, the D, all the way through position 4. The first time this comes around, count's value is going to be 0. Then it's going to be 1. Then it's going to be 2. Then it's going to be 3. Then 4. And then the loop stops. Because that will be one character per pass or per repeat. Okay? So the same thing is true here. So the first time this value is 0, this is going to say 0. This is going to be 0. So we know that this count is going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. The exact same thing is going to happen here. This is your integer expression. This is how we can use the counter control variable, your loop control variable, to display certain things about the loop. Now remember, this is your index or your integer expression. What's going to happen here is that every time that loop comes around, this is going to be like saying name position 0, name position 1, name position 2, name position 3, name position 4. And we learned in the previous example that that's how we can pull out a certain character is by referencing its position. Let's look at how this actually executes, and this will give you an even better idea of how this is going to work. So let's run this, and I'm going to try to show you both the shell results and let you follow along with the code. So it's going to force me to save this, and I'm just going to call it example. Okay? Yes, I want to replace it. So look what happened here, and I'm going to minimize this so you can see the shell as well as the code. So I'm going to move this over. Whoops, sorry about that. So I'm going to move this over just a bit so we can see both. So look what happened here. Every time that this loop went around, we set for count in range the length of name. So it's going to go 0. So look at how what's actually printing on the screen. So it says print the value of count and print the value of name count. So the first time is 0. So you see how it says 0 in F, 1 in L, 2 in 0, 3 in Y, and 4 in D. I'm sorry, that's not 0, that's the letter O. So just kind of take a moment and process what's happening here. You're telling it to print two different values, the value of count and the value of name count. Now every time that loop repeats, the value of count is being updated. The first time is 0, the second time is 1. So we're using that loop control variable as a placeholder for the index. And that's how we're able to pull out each letter out of that string to coincide with the value of count. Okay, this is just a neat way that we can use a for statement and the value of that counter control variable to also pull out information from the substring. Okay, it's all about understanding the value that's in count every time that loop repeats and how it is updated every time it repeats. Now this can also be done by using a while statement, saying the count equals count plus 1. And that was something that we learned back in the previous chapter. Remember, most of your fors can also be written as a while. And again, we can have a while statement be a counter control loop, where instead of me automatically allowing the print statement to update the value of count, I could do it by saying, you know, my while statement and count equals count plus 1, and that would increment that count for me. So the exact same thing. I hope that this is helpful.